Hi, this is Mark Soden for Fog Machine Events, and I'm here with Colin Andrew Sheffield, Adam Pacione, and Andrew Anderson. And they're going to be playing at the Beatnik Lounge in July. So, without further ado, gentlemen, why don't we just go around and you could introduce yourself and say what city you're from?
I'll go first. My name is Colin Sheffield. I'm from El Paso. That's where I was born, but I'm currently living in Austin and plan to be here for the duration.
Hi, I'm Adam Pacione. I'm from the Detroit Metroplex area originally. We moved to Fort Worth, Texas in 1983. And yeah, that's where I am currently.
I'm Andrew Anderson. I was born and raised in Oregon, spent a bunch of time in Portland, and then got tired of the rain, so I moved to hot, dry Austin. I've been here for about 10, 11 years.
So we're going to start off with some questions about Elevator Bath, the record label, and those go to Colin. So Colin, this is a short tour, as it was stated in your tour bio. So what cities are you playing?
Yeah, we're just doing 7 cities this time out. We're starting in Seattle, Washington, where I used to live for about 9 years. So it's kind of a little return show for me anyway. And then Portland, and then Oakland, Joshua Tree, Phoenix, Arizona, and then Lubbock, Texas, and Denton, Texas, and then back to Austin.
As the label owner of Elevator Bath, you release products as cassettes or CDs and on vinyl and in streaming formats. How do you decide which of those to go with which recording?
Yeah, that's always, always a question. I think I'd really try to maximize, if I can, the recording for the format, if that makes sense. In other words, if somebody has 2 30-minute tracks that they give me, then that kind of screams out for tape, because that's too long for vinyl, but it's being split in half like that. I think it just kind of is calling out for 2 sides of a release as opposed to a CD,
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, it's up to the artist as well. If they strongly prefer a CD in a situation like that, that would be absolutely fine. I love vinyl so much. It's by far my favorite format, but it is very expensive. And as of the last at least 5 years or so, it's been extremely time consuming. It takes probably a year on average now to make a record from beginning to end. And that's absurd. It used to be, 3 months tops, and now it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. So unfortunately, vinyl's kind of off the table for a while. I have one more project that I have in mind for vinyl. Generally speaking, that's unfortunately a big consideration. CDs are pretty quick to produce, and tapes are as well. So that's largely what I'm looking at. I think streaming is one that I'm not a huge fan of streaming only releases. I like to have releases that are streaming, of course, but as a component. But something that does not have a physical release, there are a lot of labels that do that, and they can continue to do that, and that's great. But Elevator Bath, I started in 1998, and it's always been a physical release, and I'd like to maintain that while I can. So that's my focus.
Okay, so we're now at the point of our discussion that we refer to at this end as show and tell. And that's where if you have a piece of gear that you might want to tell us about that you're going to be using in Joshua Tree for your set, we'd love to hear about it.
Colin, I can go first if you want. So, I've been going back and forth, kind of deciding on what exactly I'm going to haul out on tour. I keep going back and forth between whether it's going to be a Eurorack modular setup, but I think primarily what I'm going to go with this round is use the Nord Micro Modular along with some effects pedals, and we'll have a nice concise setup. I don't like to use anything too massive. Sometimes you've seen these giant Eurorack setups, but I like to keep mine very concise and small. So I think that's most likely what I'll be going with this round.
Andrew, what do you have planned?
Well, I'm gonna keep it pretty simple, mostly just have a laptop and a controller. But the piece of equipment that I use the most and that I'm going to be using to get the sounds to put on the laptop is my Zoom H6 field recorder. So basically what I do is I construct most of my stuff out of field recordings, and then I take some samples out of those or just stretch them long form. And I also use some live instruments that I'll just record through that. And I use that because I like incidentals. I like to be surprised by stuff. So I get weird background sounds sometimes when I'm recording. And there have been times where I've just completely erased the instrument and just used the background stuff. So primarily gonna be just using sounds that I've recorded with that. I did also get a real fancy little bell recently that I'm gonna record and use.
And Colin, how about you?
Yeah, I think I'm largely in the same boat as Andrew in this situation. The last time I went out on the road, I took with me kind of a big, my full setup, and it's very cumbersome. And since this tour is going to involve a flight on an airplane, I'm probably going to have to strip it down quite a bit. My main instrument, and has been since the 90s, is the Insonic EPS 16 Plus sampler from the 90s. And I'm still, that's still my go-to, and I use it for pretty much everything. My recording and mixing and effects and everything else have become a lot more sophisticated over the years, but I still pretty much start with the 16 Plus all the time. So with that in mind, I probably won't be bringing that with me. I haven't ruled it out yet entirely, but it is very heavy. If you're familiar with that machine, it's fairly ridiculously heavy. So probably I'm going to have kind of a stripped down approach, and similar to what Andrew mentioned here, just have a laptop and controller. But the 16 Plus will be with me in spirit. I actually have a Pelican case. It's like probably designed for toting a machine gun or something, but it fits the 16 Plus perfect. It's actually relatively airplane ready, but it's still so heavy, and it's going to be quite a hassle to bring it. So probably won't.
The next question is, what's the best experimental set you've seen recently? And this would, of course, include videos because of COVID.
Well, I saw William Wysinski and he ripped his shirt off in the show. That was pretty entertaining. I don't know that I've ever seen an ambient guy throw his shirt off. He's very like old school rock and roll, which I kind of love. It's just not something that I expect. But yeah, it was a great show watching that.
I definitely appreciate, I was at that show as well. I really appreciate that he is not afraid to really show his personality on stage, which is something that you really don't necessarily see a lot of in, more subdued music like that. You kind of expect to see somebody, chin stroking, behind the computer or something like that at an ambient show. And he was absolutely not that. Props to William Wysinski.
Adam?
Yeah, so I would say I haven't seen too many live shows over the last couple of years, but one thing I've kind of rediscovered Andrew Pekler. He started, I guess the live performance I saw was probably back from 2020 or maybe 2019, but it basically was supporting his Phantom Islands project. And essentially it was a release he did where I guess he created music that would have come from islands that were reported in maritime logs, in the past few centuries, whether they were made up completely by, the ship's captain, or they're actually found an island and it was never rediscovered again. It's just he's kind of imagining maybe like what the indigenous population's music would sound like. And I found that extremely interesting.
If I can interject really quick, I want to tell you about a show I saw that I thought was excellent.
Oh.
I'm pleased to say it was actually my friend and frequent collaborator, James Ekripi, played here in Austin maybe 6 weeks ago. And it was his first solo gig, because he usually plays with me. That was his first solo gig in, gosh, probably 8 years or so. So, but it was absolutely fantastic. it was just kind of sound design heavy, but very surprising and challenging in the best ways. It just kind of excited the ear, you know, and it was a great set. So yeah, that was really wonderful. And just because I've got the mic, one other show I want to mention that was probably my favorite experimental set I've seen in the last decade or so was, gosh, it's probably been 5 years or so since he was here in Austin, but the Italian artist Valerio Tricoli was here. He played a duo set with Werner Daffeldecker, which was absolutely tremendous. But then the following day, Valerio Tricoli played a solo set, and I thought it was even more tremendous. And he's just a total master and a real inspiration to me. And seeing him really and truly doing everything he does live and improvised spur of the moment was just mind-blowing, because his records are highly composed. But seeing him perform live and work his magic with an actual, you know, reel-to-reel tape that he's recording to in real time, and then manipulating those sounds back in real time, and then recording them again with the tape. And it's just quite a juggling act he does, but the end result is absolutely amazing. One of my favorite things I've seen in a very long time.
Tell us about your recordings that you are promoting on this tour.
So I'm promoting a new release of mine on Elevator Bath that just came out this year. It's called Vagrancies. It's 4 long form tracks with 4 like kind of interludes in the middle. Most of my earlier self-release stuff was me obfuscating all of my field recordings to the point that you really couldn't hear them. You didn't know what they were coming from or what their sources were. And there was a few things that would just sort of push through the membrane and then pull back. I decided to just sort of let those breathe a little bit more, give them some air. And then like right as I started working on that is when lockdown happened. So it felt even kind of more important to get those sounds that I was getting from outside and putting them into the music so people could actually, you know, hear some of those. And there's some obscure sources, like just recording the sounds off of a vacant apartment's balcony one night. Whatever made it on. And then there's some really personal stuff in there that I'm not really going to get into, but I definitely distorted some of that. Also, probably the first live instrument I've played in years and recorded. It was a 12-string guitar with a bow that I played, which I haven't recorded myself playing live instrument, like actually playing one in a really long time. Usually they're software instruments that I'm putting into my older stuff. So that was a lot of fun. And there's some tape decay on track recorders in my old Tascam Portastudio from when I was a kid. When I first started doing solo music, I have that same Portastudio. It's old, it's dirty, it's crackly, has some like welded together stuff, and yeah. So there's that. You know, it's about some personal journey that's kind of also mirrors the whole socio-political journey everybody else has been going on too. So
Colin?
Quick plug for Vagrancies album by Andrew. It's a really, really wonderful, beautiful album, haunting ambient album. And it does feature a guest spot by Austin's local hero, Thor Harris of Swans fame, future governor Thor Harris, and was mastered by the great Lawrence English from Australia. So it's just a great sounding and fantastic album. As for me, my own work, I'm promoting an album which unfortunately is not out yet. The test pressings will be ready in September. This is a vinyl release, hence the incredibly long wait to get it out. But it's coming out on the German record label Alpha Vegan, and it's an LP called Don't Ever Let Me Know, and it's 2 very long 24-minute pieces that I made in 2019. And it is largely it is entirely a tribute to my home city of El Paso. All the samples, I really only work with samples. That's my MO, and this LP is entirely comprised of samples that originated in El Paso in some form or fashion. it's kind of a tribute to El Paso and also to my late father, who was born in El Paso and passed away in El Paso. And he took the cover art photograph that I'm using, as well as the back cover. So, you know, it's another pretty personal record for me as well, but I'm really pleased with it. I can't wait to get it out in the world. It's one of those things that I recorded it such a long time ago now that I've actually got much newer stuff that I may be playing, you know, at these shows, but nevertheless, I want to, you know, keep the work that's coming out on this LP, want to keep it alive. So I'll be returning to it as well. But yeah, looking forward to that.
Yeah, so I'll be out promoting a 4-CD box set that Elevator Bath released recently. It compiles a lot of my work from 1999 to 2009 that was originally released as a monthly subscription series that I did in quantities of 100 throughout 2009s. And many of the works originated as tape loop experiments that I used as soundtracks to a lot of my photography when I would be showing in small galleries in Texas. And like I said, it's some of it started out as tape loop experiments that I kind of filed away and then brought them back into the computer. And the box set itself also has a bunch of photography that I've done over the years that would have been shown in the galleries where the music was played. And anyhow, it was a bunch of work that like I said, I did it in 2009, where I was mailing 3-inch CDs in envelopes, you know, all sorts of country, you know, from Russia to Japan to wherever. And then I kind of forgot about it for a while. It was available digitally, and then I took it down. And then Colin said, "Hey, what do you think about compiling this, getting it remastered and putting it out in a nice box set?" And of course, sure, that sounds fabulous. And anyhow, that's what I'll be promoting this round.
Our last question is kind of subjective and personal, and it's what did you hear when you were a very young person that started you on the road to where you are today?
Yeah, so I am ADHD and I would be distracted by just about everything. But things that would grab my attention were generally like droning sounds. I would lay out in the yard and listen to various airplanes fly over and lawnmowers. There would be like lawnmower symphonies during the summer that I would just sit out there and listen to the different pitches and kind of feel the movement, almost kind of like binaural beats, oddly enough. That really moved me a lot as a kid. And then there was a bridge that I used to have to walk over that very unintentionally had holes drilled underneath the railing, and it was always windy. So it was like a flute, like a droning flute. And the notes would change as you would walk because people who built it would just drill the holes randomly. And so it was like this weird movement, like this slow droning movement as you would walk across it. That really moved me quite a bit. And then I think the last thing that was pretty formative was this reel-to-reel video that I would watch in grade school about Mount St. Helens exploding. And the wow and the flutter on that thing was just crazy. And it had this really like cheesy folk intro to it, but the guitar would just like, I swear that the guys from Boards of Canada had to watch this too, because it was just like, and I would just sit there and go, what is this? And then I would go home and mess with the tapes in my tape player and get yelled at by my stepdad for doing that. But yeah, just ever since hearing that particular sound from the tape, it's pretty moving. And Delia Derbyshire's Doctor Who intro, it's another huge thing for me as a kid. I would love the few times that would pop onto our weird random cable TV, mostly just so I could watch the intro.
It's really hard to pinpoint where the journey began for me, I guess, because I've just been a music total enthusiast my whole life, really. But the answers probably lie in my formative years, probably around the mid 80s when I first kind of discovered hip hop. And I think listening to Raising Hell by Run DMC was hugely influential on me, and it continues to be. I love that album. But I think hearing samples used and the way they did, like the opening track on that album, Peter Piper, it's my vote for finest ever hip hop piece of music, if I could put just one. But the Bob James sample, which is kind of what the whole thing is based on, is just amazing. And the use of that, and it gave a whole new life to that, or rather created a whole new life out of just that little loop of music. And I think I didn't realize until much later how much of an influence that was on me. I believe Raising Hell came out in 1986, and 1987 was probably the other extremely important piece of music in my childhood, which was Pump Up the Volume by Mars, which is still one of my favorite tracks of all time. And the B-side of that is amazing as well. But Pump Up the Volume is entirely samples pretty much, and a little bit of beats and some guitar noise and stuff. But again, just hearing audio collage like that, my whole audio pursuit has been based on those principles, of taking the sounds that I like and recontextualizing them. That's what I do. And that's, I've always considered myself first and foremost a music fan, more than I am an artist. I'm a fan of music. So chopping up the music that I love and making collages of it was a natural outgrowth of that. So my one final influence I would mention would be the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is a film I love, but that soundtrack is especially amazing and haunting. I think that established my love of like really analog delay and like kind of a tape echo. Just those sounds really were ingrained in my mind from a very young age when I first watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre, probably in the mid 80s as well. So those things all in a blender, that's where I am now. So
it is really difficult to pinpoint exactly, where and when it started. I can think of several films growing up in Detroit. There was always a lot of horror films on. They had several horror hosts. One soundtrack that kind of stuck with me over the years was by John Cameron for a film called Psychomania. And it was, kind of psychedelic, heavy on the fuzz pedal. But then, later on, in my preteen and teen years, I was real heavily into things like The Cure. And I remember reading an interview with Robert Smith, and he mentioned that his favorite band at the time was the Cocteau Twins, and having to go find out what that was about. And I would say it probably started with them, just in terms of the textures that they were able to create. At the time, it was like nothing I'd ever heard. Elizabeth Fraser's vocals were great, but just the guitars, it's just this, I don't know, it just meshed these great organic tones. And then I would say at some point I got into the whole, Brian Eno or Harold Budd, David Sylvian's long form ambient pieces with Holger. And then, leading into the 90s with the whole shoegaze movement with My Bloody Valentine and Slowdive, or Seafeel or Flying Saucer Attack. These just the one thing that runs through all of it is just the textures that really appealed to me that these bands created. Not so much the lyrical content, but just, the textures that they were able to create.
I should mention that Harold Budd used to live here in Joshua Tree.
Really?
I know, I was really, he was a huge influence, and very depressing when he passed away, because I always felt that at some point I definitely was going to make an effort to see him perform. And, I'll never have that opportunity again, but yeah, I probably listened to the Pearl, I don't know, once a month, and I probably have done that since 1987. So I don't know, his recordings just really have stayed with me.
Is there anything you'd like to say to end the interview?
I just want to say thank you so much for talking with us and for helping us put together this show, and for getting Julie Carpenter to join the bill as well. She's someone I've known a long time. She's a very good friend of my wife's, actually, and they've known each other since college. So it'll be a really cool thing for us to be sharing a bill. So I also want to say it's a coincidence. I actually reached out to you, Mark, before that it had even occurred to me that we should try to get Julie involved. So it was just a happy accident. So I'm glad it all worked out.
Andrew, anything in closing?
Oh, I'm just excited to play Joshua Tree. I was there for the first time a couple of years ago on a road trip and just absolutely loved it out there. It's fantastic. I've also been reading a book. I just forgot the name of the author, but it's a bunch of short stuff about weird cryptozoology and desert mythology. And I think he lives there. I can't believe I just forgot his name, but
Desert Oracle?
yeah, that guy.
Ken Lane.
Yeah, that big yellow book. It's fantastic. And then if you actually listen to him read it, it's even better to then go back and read it in his voice, because it just makes it so much more fun to read.
Adam?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to coming out there. I've never been, and it's one place I've always wanted to go to, and looking forward to seeing all the folks coming out to hear us perform.
Well, thank you again. And this is Mark Soden for Fog Machine Events, and we'll be seeing these gentlemen in July. So mark your calendar.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks.